So thank you so much from the introduction from Chris. I might just add that I am not a medical psychologist, an important differentiation to make. I'm a work and organizational psychologist, or you might also hear that referred to as an occupational psychologist, depending on which country you're operating in. So my job is to help organizations look after their people in order to make them experience better well-being and more productivity. And there's actually a really lovely, well, I think it's lovely, and you should as well, reciprocal relationship between well-being and between productivity. We know that if you work on an organization's productivity levels, doing that in the right approach will often boost their well-being levels. And I'm sure many of you can relate to the fact that we do feel better when we are being productive, when we're checking off that to-do list and achieving incremental progress towards the goals that we are working towards. On the other hand, if an organization prioritizes well-being, in particular psychological and mental well-being, that organization will enjoy boosted levels of productivity as well. So it's an absolute win-win. The business case for well-being in the workplace is very, very sound and very robust. And of course, you all have an interest in that because you're listening in today. So for me, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the question, is prevention better than cure? I thought that James pointed out a really good comparison between how he'd much rather have the vaccine for COVID-19 than experience COVID in order to be cured from it as well. And do you know what? I hadn't thought of that, despite hearing about vaccinations every day on the news for the last 3 months, it seems like. So I'm going to give you my perspectives. So first of all, I'm just going to zoom out and let you imagine, it's not a pretty picture, what happens if workplace stress goes unmanaged, okay? So there are many bad side effects, as you can probably expect. One of them, and these are in no order of size, they're just a random selection of issues that happen. We have productivity. As I've mentioned, workplace stress, pretty clear. I loved Paul's analogy of you don't want stressed out boatsmen navigating a highly complex boat or ship for that matter, because mistakes will be made and catastrophic outcomes can occur. Of course, productivity will go down as well. We know that performance goes down whenever workplace stress is unmanaged. We know that well-being goes down. We know that employee engagement goes down, and as well as that, physical health can go down as well. I think we often associate stress or think about stress as an unpleasant feeling, but it also has really severe physiological consequences, which again can emerge in different ways for different individuals. And there is a sobering statistic here, and I'll read it out to you as it's said here. Chronic stress at work is more damaging to physiological health than exposure to secondhand smoke. I'll just let that land with you. Exposure to stress at work is worse for us than exposure to secondhand smoke. Now, I'm dialing in from Ireland today, and back in the early 2000s, when the news broke in the medical journals that secondhand smoke was a cause of cancer, it was seriously detrimental to our health, the government scrambled quickly to implement new policies to change things about the way we consider smoking in society. And so many policies and rules were brought in at the societal level in terms of no smoking in indoor public places, no smoking in outdoor public places, smoke-free campuses, so on and so forth. And as a culture in many countries, that has all been adapted to because we really understand the implications of the risks from exposure to secondhand smoke. So it's quite shocking to think about the risks of workplace stress are actually worse for our health than exposure to secondhand smoke. Yet we're still waiting for the policies to come from the government or other bodies to help organizations or make organizations address that workplace stress. So just an interesting point to kick off with, but something that absolutely needs to be considered and remembered when you are working on your workplace wellness strategies. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few levels of intervention, and this really was the best way I could think about to answer the question, is prevention better than cure? So I'm going to start with, and I actually have done this the wrong way around, so I'm going to draw your attention to part 3. do not look at part two and part one. So part three here, you've got your tertiary interventions. And this is when an organization works to implement third level interventions. These can include mental health first aid, the employee assistance program, smoking cessation, or any type, to be honest, of physical activity initiatives. So these are all beneficial, but they do fall under that treatment, rehab, or recovery way of making an intervention. So they are definitely helpful. If you're doing them, keep doing them, but they should not be looked at as a standalone part of your approach to well-being. Often, many organizations do tick a box. They do present their shop window very nicely with some mental health first aid. It's valuable, it's important, but in no way is it getting to the root cause of the problem, okay? So we can move forward a step to the secondary layer of intervention. And here is when you look to upskill your workforce. Again, very helpful, really, really good in terms of equipping an organization with resilience skills, with stress management skills, and with mindfulness, for example. And I'll talk a little bit about emotional intelligence shortly. Paul alluded to that already, but it actually does fit in to that primary level of intervention. So doing okay if you're approaching your intervention with this tertiary level. You're doing a little bit better if many of your initiatives are at that secondary level when you are looking to upskill your workforce, but still you're not getting to the root of your problem. And actually, you may even get employees asking or questioning approaches to interventions like this. Well, okay, that's kind of you to help me deal with my stress, but why do you keep giving me this stress, right? Well, if you look at the root of the problem, then maybe answer that and actually get some real change started. But again, as James said, you can only make changes if you know what you're dealing with. So you need to measure in order to manage different situations. And again, coming back to that primary level, which is the absolute vital level to get right when it comes to your interventions regarding workplace well-being, it's all about your organizational design, your team structures, your people processes, ultimately the culture in which your organization operates, and critically, your leadership behaviors, okay? So again, organizational design is going to be a really, really interesting one going forward. It's likely that we're about to go into a significant recession in which, as a result of the economic shutdowns of COVID-19. And in times like this, we often get downsizing. Teams have to deliver the same amount of work, perhaps with one or two less people. And that is only going to boost your stress levels of particular teams, divisions, and organizations when the workload increases, but the resources decrease, okay? And in which case, you might get some engagement in resilience training or stress management training, but you're not going to get the most out of it because you still haven't gotten to the root of the problem. When it comes to leadership behaviors, this is really vital. And a lot of people, especially with the shift to teleworking that did take place in 2 weeks, and I should note, a shift like that in any organization would usually take about 2.5 years to actually make happen. We've all delivered it in pretty much 2 weeks in the midst of a global pandemic, border shutdowns, and pretty much global panic. So while that can be celebrated for such agility, a lot of boxes will be left unticked and a lot of areas will have been smoothed over and not properly addressed. So now is actually a brilliant time for you to do some root cause analysis to see what's going on in your organization so that then you can design a targeted strategy to improving well-being within your organization, leading ultimately to improved levels of productivity and ultimately performance within your organization. So I'm just going to point this out, and really it fits really well into the piece there about leadership behavior. And again, you can introduce a suite of unbelievable, amazing well-being policies, and I feel I've heard them all sometimes, and it can cost the world. If you've got the biggest budget, you can do what you want, but if you don't root that activity in how people are managed, you'll never get that supportive, inclusive culture that's committed to well-being, and your initiatives that you spend loads of on won't have the real impact unless you address that leadership perspective. And I will just talk you through quickly that employee life cycle when it comes to management. And again, Paul mentioned an injection of emotional intelligence will help, and it absolutely will. Especially in terms of remote leadership, what we need is emotional intelligence. And they say that about 30% of people, leaders, have enough and they're well suited for remote leadership. 50% don't have enough, but they can be trained. And the other 10% will need a good bit of motivation to embrace the training and make some changes. But remember, a lot of individuals are promoted for technical skills into management positions rather than for their people management skills. And in those cases, this is where you really can look at boosting the emotional intelligence levels of your management workforce to really help make a difference at that root cause, to really help you then get the most out of the other initiatives that you put in place, those secondary and tertiary initiatives regarding your well-being strategy. And again, you can actually recruit for emotional intelligence. You can use it as one aspect of a bigger recruitment matrix using psychometric tests such as the EQI 2.0 is one that I use quite a lot. In fact, I'm in the middle of a leadership development program right now using that particular program. Involve it in your onboarding, involve well-being in your onboarding content. Of course, learning and development should be a continuous approach. And I'm sure I'm speaking to many people that do appreciate that. And again, we have to recognize and celebrate those managers that are exhibiting the right behaviors, the right leadership behaviors to drive well-being, to reduce stress levels, and to make work life as easy as it possibly can for your employees. But again, if I just go back to that primary level of intervention, you kind of have to get these things right before you can go on to the leadership development piece. So really having a look at your organizational design. It seems hard, it's not the easy option, but if you do that, that's where you're going to set the stage for further success for everything else that you do from there. Making your team structures, making sure your team structures are right, looking at those people processes and ultimately the culture. You do that by using a product like Stress Factor, by generating those heat maps like James showed, so you can really identify what's going on and where, and even better, make a really informed conclusion on that by layering in the personality perspectives of those that answered the survey as well. Oh, and that's me. So I'm really just summing up. I think I'm right on time. And the closing message from me is get to the root cause. From then, you can grow and develop your well-being strategy. It's going to be a moving piece of work. Really, what you need to do at several points in your well-being plan, be that at the end of year 1, year 2, and year 3, measure, but remeasure as well. So you're always monitoring your progress and adapting and reacting in line with that so that you can best serve your people, because it's your people who effectively are serving your customers, no matter what industry you work in. So thank you all. That is all from me. Back over to Chris.